There's this story from Ghana about, this young girl looking at his father who is peering into the past intensely. And the girl says, "Papa, you are always looking into the past. Why?" And the father looks at her and says, "My daughter, because the answers to the future always reside in the past." And that's where knowledges that are banished in the past, like Ubuntu, become relevant. The word Ubuntu comes from a southern Nguni word or phrase that says, "I am because you are. You are because we are." In other words, as human beings, there's a sense in which there is some connection and interdependence. We rely on each other. Let me start by saying that Ubuntu is not a political program. I also want to add that it is not, a religious, expression. Ubuntu is about our social awareness, a consciousness of the others, a consciousness of the fact that we all have a responsibility to ourselves as human beings, especially the vulnerable among us. But perhaps more importantly, we also have a responsibility to, the world around us, the totality of our environment. Did you know that 30% of food crops in the world need cross-pollination from bees? These tiny insects. So if you are going to destroy the bees or the earth, you are ultimately destroying yourself. So the principle of co-agency implies that we are co-creators. It relies on the recognition that we are interdependent in a balanced biodiversity. So it is that principle of co-agency that Ubuntu encourages. The awareness that our interdependence, that personhood moves beyond the relationship between humans and humans, but a relationship between humans and non-humans, precisely because we are implicated in their lives and they are implicated in our lives. Even in the West, which thrives on the principle of individualism, there's a sense in which they agree that they are fundamental, basic human rights that each one of us owes to the community. I always like to make a distinction between individuality and individualism. Individuality gives you a sense of independence and freedom and also a development of your own personal character. Individualism, to the contrary, is self-referential. It is about you, me, all the times. And the ego always takes over. In all human societies, the way we temper the personal ego, communities moderate those by constantly reminding you that you are not living in isolation. You belong to a family, you belong to a broader community, you belong to a community of your peers, and you also belong to the world, and you have a responsibility for that world. If you get, too implicated in your subject, then you end up sounding like a missionary. I don't want to sound like a missionary. What Ubuntu has taught me, in a very profound way, is to realize that some of what we call banished knowledges or indigenous knowledge systems that we have here in Africa and in many other parts of the world, that there is value in some of these knowledges, and that perhaps if we want to reimagine the society of the future, then there's a sense in which a value system like Ubuntu can teach us, one, our mutuality, secondly, our conviviality as a people. Let me go back to our history in South Africa here. And, the emergence, or shall I say re-emergence of Ubuntu was at a very, very critical moment in the history of this country. We were moving from a repressive past and into a democratic dispensation. The issue then, how do we move the society forward? How do we reconstitute a new South Africa? And this was popularized by the Archbishop Desmond Tutu. He came up, he realized that we can dig into our past and find a value system that can help us to achieve redress, restorative justice, forgiveness, and also healing. Among the African communities, around, there are important rituals, birth, death. You'll always find communities coming together to support each other. Just like a ritual of greeting. It took me time to understand why people insisted that they have to be greeted. When I was at the University of the Witwatersrand, every time I was taking a break from my work, I would go downstairs at the cafeteria to buy some food. And sometimes I was so intense that I would not see the person that is serving me. I just go there and say, chicken pie. And she looks at me, chicken pie. Then she would respond, sawubona. Basically forcing me to realize that I am not recognizing her. So recognition is fundamental. As Mother Teresa used to tell us, compassion is useless without action or application. Ubuntu is about the idea of acting. If you empathize, then go out and share with the vulnerable among us, with the weak among us. If you care, go out and make sure that our environment is not degraded, it is protected. Make sure that we have a responsibility, for our universe and for other people. There's a fascinating story that I got, from a friend of mine that works in the Amazon. That when the indigenous people in the Amazon, when they go fishing and they catch too much fish, they throw back some because of the awareness that the river feeds them, is a source of life.
If you could give me one word to summarize what Ubuntu means to you, what would it be?
Ultimately, interdependence.